Thousand Autumns, is a Meng Xi Shi novel. This is an audiobook made by fans for other fans. Disclaimer. The main couple of the story is made up of two men. If you don't like it, don't listen. Thank you. Remember, subscribe and click the bell to stay updated on all the new releases. Enjoy. Chapter 119. Everyone's expression changed hearing this. Zhang Glaoli and Shan said, a while back Tuzhu was here, saying they were hoping Suan Dushan would form an alliance with Tuzhu. Yu Zhangji, he had wanted to say the two words Zhang Qiao, but looking at Shen Qiao, he changed his mind. Wushi refused. They must have not been able to accept this time aligning with Hehuan sect. They want to use this chance before the Zhangjiao is decided to cause trouble. Shen Qiao said Tuzhu wasn't able to conquer the central plains. Between them and Suan Dushan is the entirety of Zhou. They couldn't control Suan Dushan directly, they can only work with Hehuan sect. Lu Yu didn't wait for Tan Yuanchun to speak, seizing the opportunity, then as Shen Qi sees it, what should we do? Shen Qiao, we can only adapt accordingly, force against force, dirt against water. He described it with levity, but the others were nowhere near as light-hearted. Tan Yuanchun, they've already slaughtered their way up the mountain, clearly have no good intentions. If we shrink back like turtles into their shells, we'll permit the devastation of the disciples outside. In this moment we need to demonstrate our resolve, meet the enemy directly. No one had any objections to this, no matter how heated their arguments had been. It was to do with the inner workings of Suan Dushan. Now against an external enemy, they should have a united front. Shen Qiao also had no intention of fighting over such a detail. He followed the others outside. At this time, the opposing side had converged on the mountain, came face to face with Tan Yuanchun and the exiting elders from Sankingdian. Xiao Se, who had been in the lead, declared in a clear, loud voice, "It's too much for all the elders of Suan Dushan to greet us, you are really too kind." Lu Yu smiled coldly, "You injured our disciples, break into our sect, and still dare to speak shamelessly." His character was fiery, he drew his sword. His intention was to fight without holding back. Xiao Se took half a step back, twirled his fan in front of him. "Your Wujiang is average, you're no match for my Shizun, why rush forward to your own humiliation? I heard a rumor that Suan Dushan Yu Zhangjiao has vanished, rendering you all leaderless. Today I see that it's indeed true, why else would things be such a mess?" Tan Yuanchun, frowning, "Our inner sect matters doesn't require your intervention. Today Suan Dushan is closed to visitors, no one invited you here, it's beyond rude." Xiao Se smiled, "You don't look familiar, which elder are you?" Tan Yuanchun, Tan Yuanchun. Xiao Se raised an eyebrow. Rumor has it that Qi Fengge Qi Zhengren had a first disciple, although he became a disciple the earliest he didn't stand out. That year when Qi Fengge was deciding his successor, he skipped the first disciple, and chose the second disciple Shen Qiao. Was it so? He clearly saw Shen Qiao present, purposefully provoking conflict. Shen Qiao's attention was not on Xiao Se, he was watching Sang Jingxing, and Duan Vinyang. This time the newcomers were numerous, but compared to that day at Shijiandawai, there were less people from Hehuan sect. Shen Qiao noticed Yuan Xiuxia was not among them. Also missing were several familiar faces of Hehuan sect disciples. Shen Qiao didn't know their names but remembered them. By wrong, when Shen Qiao's gaze landed on her, winked at him, and smiled. Shen Qiao looked away uncomfortably. Bian Yanmi I bent over and whispered, "Hehuan sect, man or woman, all eat people whole, even the bones. They most enjoy men like Shen Daozang whose yang energy is full and brimming, you'd better watch yourself." Shen Qiao, neither laughing nor crying, I think Bai Rong is not that bad. Never mind that he had no intention of that kind. Bien Yanmi, I unaware of the situation, was afraid he would fall for it, gave him a reminder. Shenzang Jiao may think she looks innocent, but she's dual cultivated with who knows how many young men. Technically her Shifu Sang Jingxin was also a patron behind her curtains. Shen Qiao already knew of this matter, hearing it again, couldn't help but sigh. To be a person in this world, who doesn't wish to live by their will, but then who can disregard their circumstances. The most cruel of people, even if they show a little mercy, I don't want to overlook it. He still remembered himself in those dire situations, how Bai Rong showed mercy, gave him hints, although it couldn't be described as life-saving as bringing hot coals into a snowstorm, but in a situation where she could have thrown the stone after him into the well, and gained favor for her sect, she didn't pursue it to the end. For this alone Shen Qiao felt he was obligated to remember his debt. Bien Yanmi, I knew Shen Qiao's character to be kind, but didn't expect him to have such a different outlook towards Bai Rong. He thought, you're this soft-hearted, no wonder you're hopeless when it comes to Shizun. They exchanged a few more words in whispers. On the other end things were about to combust between Xuandu sect and Hehuan sect. One more word, swords drawn and arrows notched. The reason that nothing had started was that along with Hehuan sect, Duan Vinyang and a few unfamiliar to Zhe faces were also present. Xuandus Han lacked a clear leader, for now they were scattered, everyone had their own reservations, weren't confident about having the upper hand, and so hadn't made the first move. The newcomers had also realized this. Duan Vinyang, smiling not smiling, I hear your respected sect is deciding on a Zhangjiao today. We're here for the fun. Clearly your sect is not united on any front. It would probably be hard to arrive at a decision. How about we help with the process? Tan Yuan Shun, a decisive rejection. Xuandus Han sect matters has no place for outsiders. Please leave at once, otherwise don't blame us for what happens next. As soon as he said this he was reprimanded by Lu Yu. On their way up the mountain they injured who knows how many of our disciples, we can't let them off so easily. Duan Vinyang laughed, can't let them off easily, and what would you like to see? Naturally, for you to leave your life here. This sentence was not said by anyone in the crowd, the voice was hoarse, despite maximum effort, it was quiet. If not for everyone present having strong wuzhong, they wouldn't have heard it at all. Everyone looked in the direction of the voice, were all totally dumbstruck. They saw a person make their way towards Sankingdian, heavy footsteps, as if carrying internal injuries. His leg was injured too, his gait was unbalanced, his clothes were splattered with blood, his face was also not spared, he looked battered and worn to the extreme. But no one from Xuandus Han would not recognize him. Uai. The newest arrival was indeed Uai. In his hand was a bamboo pole he used as a crutch, step by step he walked towards them. Duan Vinyang also appeared shocked, rumor has it that Yu Zhangjiao vanished several days ago, looks like rumors can't be trusted. Uai looked at him coldly, that I'm not dead, I guess you're sorely disappointed. Duan Vinyang broke into a laugh, what does it have to do with me? I heard that as soon as you died, your Xuandus Han fought over the position of Zhangjiao, Yu Zhangjiao should suspect your martial siblings instead. Tan Yuan Shun, concerned, Yushidi, you're still injured, you should go get your wounds treated and rest. Uai shot him a look, I was wrong. Everyone was confused by this non sequitur. Tan Yuan Shun, what wrong? Uai, blandly, I was solely focused on securing Xuandus Han's legacy for the next 1,000 years. I felt that the previous generations of grandmasters were too stubborn sealing themselves off, unwilling to open their eyes and take a look at the world outside, so I spent my efforts plotting against Shen Qiao, working with Tzu. I thought that under my leadership, Xuandushan could re-establish itself as the number one Daoist sect under the heavens, who knew I was wrong from the start. Working with Tzu, akin to asking a tiger for its skin, I wasn't willing to be their puppet, to surrender Xuandushan to them, so they struck a deadly blow, chasing me from the position of Zhang Qiao, choosing to support another who would be willing to be a puppet Zhang Qiao, and in return receive Xuandushan's 100-year holdings. Tan Yuan Chun, stunned, does that mean your disappearance had to do with the Tzu? Uai, coldly, that night I was in seclusion, someone mimicked Shen Qiao's writing in a letter they sent by pigeon. It said they were waiting for me in the courtyard on the outer mountain, who knew that after I arrived, I was ambushed by 3 mystery people. They all had their faces covered, wore black, had strong wuzhong. I was no match, received severe injuries, fell off the cliff, my descent was stopped by branches, I was fortunate to escape death, returned to the land of the living today. Perhaps the heavens took pity on me, gave me this chance to point out who's responsible. Lu Yu furrowed his brows. You mean, someone pretended to be Shen Qiao and sent you a letter? Tan Yuan Chun asked further, who were those 3 mystery people? Uai shook his head, I don't know, throughout they did not reveal their face, but I know, it was definitely not Er Shixian. Shen Qiao, blandly, someone mimicking my writing in a letter to you, and you believed them at once, this means you had a guilty conscience. Uai, bitterly, Er Shixian is right, up until now, everything I've done, nothing has come to fruition, but has caused you harm, caused you to. His mind was a mess, he paused, after a few moments he forced himself back into calm, caused you to suffer that kind of bitter misery, I am sorry. If an apology was useful, murder, arson would also be fine after the fact. Shen Qiao was not moved by this I am sorry. You speak seriously. He's not even willing to address me as Shidi? Uai's expression was bleak, bitterly he said, this is what I deserve. Tan Yuan Chun, you Shidi, with our enemy in front of us, can we discuss your situation later? No. Because my ambush was certainly related to Tzu. Uai took a deep breath, questioned Duan Vinyang, a few days before, I just refused your suggestions, not willing to be Tzu's puppet, immediately after I was ambushed, if you say you weren't involved, even a fool wouldn't believe you. Duan Vinyang laughed, Yu Zhangjiao shouldn't randomly accuse the innocent, I'm not from Xuandushan, how would I be able to sneak in without a trace, no matter what I'd have to injure a handful of disciples. Shen Qiao suddenly replied, if there was a mole in Xuandushan working with you, naturally no one would be the wiser. Lu Yu, Tan Yuan Chun, and the others hearing this, all were shocked, what does Shen Qiao mean? Shen Qiao said blandly, Yuan Ying said to me, Tzu could not get through to Uai with threats nor promises, had their designs on finding someone else, Tzu told him if he was willing to obey, they would help him into the Zhangjiao position, since Yuan Ying didn't agree, logically they would look for others, I think, eventually there would be someone who couldn't resist the enticement. Uai coughed, held his chest and said, it's true, first I was ambushed, then in the interim when the Zhangjiao was undecided, you all came up the mountain, even if no one snuck out a message, clearly today was planned. Duan Vinyang and the others picking this interval to come to the mountain, their intention was not to out-argue everyone on Xuandushan, Uai's appearance was unintended, but this accident didn't really affect too much, but Shen Qiao was a problem. Coming to a decision, Duan Vinyang exchanged a glance with Sang Jingxing, and then he laughed, If you Zhang Jiao says it like this, if I don't act the role of the villain, it would disappoint you. He waved his hand, the Tuju behind him received his command, raised their sabers and lunged towards Lu Yu, Tan Yuanshan, etc., surrounding them. The elders all had varying levels of Wuzhong, even someone like Tan Yuanshan with very average caliber, that was only in comparison to Qi Feng's other disciples. He wasn't someone that could be easily challenged by anybody, but to be brought up the mountain by Duan Vinyang, these Tuju were also no lightweights. In an instant they clashed, knife glint sword shadow, very loud. Duan Vinyang stood to the side, did not join in. Smiling he said, these people were personally trained by my Shizun, could be counted as the fiercest warriors among the Tuju. They've long heard how strong Suan Dushan's Daozangs were. Today is a good time for them to learn. I implore each and every Daozang to show no mercy. Lu Yu and the rest were preoccupied, who would have the leisure to reply to him. Lu Liang saw Duan Vinyang look his way, he froze, terrified that he'd pick on his trivial, disciple self. He couldn't help shrinking back behind Shen Qiao. Lu Yu a swipe of his blade, forced the Tuju back, shouted, Shen Qi, in the past Suan Dushan owes you a lot. That day I deemed you a disgraced disciple, I did speak out on your behalf. I beg you to consider Qi Zhengren, defend Suan Dushan, don't let these thieves get any advantage. Duan Vinyang laughed out loud, Shen Daozang, I feel bad for you. When you fell, they didn't help, now they're in trouble, and want you to return a favor. If you don't feel wronged, I feel wronged on your behalf. As I see it, ignore them, after they're all dead, the Zhangjiao position is yours again. How about it? Nothing about it? Shen Qiao said blandly, Uai self-proclaimed his Zhangjiao position, I didn't agree to it, he expelled me from Suan Dushan, but I am still Qi Feng's disciple. From his back, he pulled out Shen Hetong Bei, the sword body shone under the sun, rippling, the gradual sound of wind and thunder. With me here, no one will touch Suan Dushan. He said this evenly, it carried no threat of moving earth or mountain, but no one dared underestimate him. Shen Qi, let me help you. In this moment, there came a shout from the side, the shadows of 3 people approached, 1 in front and 2 in the back. Zhang Glao Kongzhen was in the lead, behind him were his disciples Lian and Yunchang who Shen Qiao had met in town. These 2 had followed Shen Qiao at a distance, only wanting to observe the action. They didn't expect Tuju and Hehuan sect to ascend the mountain looking for trouble. Internal conflict they didn't dare interfere, but an external attack was something else entirely. The 2 of them hurried to seek out their Shifu Kongzang Glao, then rushed with Kongzang Glao all the way here. Kongzang stood in front of Shen Qiao, folded his hands in greeting, Kongzang is late, I await Zhang Jiao's discipline. Shen Qiao nodded, Kongzang Glao was in the middle of seclusion, an important junction, to have rushed over is already fortune, what discipline? It was uncertain whether he heard Zhang Jiao these 2 words addressed to him, Shen Qiao didn't deny them. Kongzang's old face however was flushed with embarrassment, seclusion was an excuse, the truth was that he didn't want to participate in his sect's selection of the next Zhang Jiao. He didn't know whether Shen Qiao had already seen through him, could only muddle through, saying, with the enemy before us, I cannot think solely of myself, these ruffians, let me take care of them, Zhang Jiao doesn't need to bother with them. Duan Vinyang continued to stand there, clearly disregarding Kongzang, I'm afraid you're no match for me. Kongzang laughed coldly, arguing is pointless, you'll know soon enough. Saying this he advanced with sword in hand, aimed for Duan Vinyang. This fight starting, Hehuan sect could no longer just stand by and watch, except for Sang Jingxing, everyone else moved. In a moment fights broke out everywhere. Li and Yunchang, these two were assisting their Shifu, but they were too young, their Wuzhong hadn't reached a certain stage, to be matched against Xiao Se by Rong. They were at a disadvantage, very soon they were on the defensive. Yunchang's sword style had a clear opening, Xiao Se's finger became a claw, broke through his sword aura to grab at his neck, the movement fast as lightning. Yunchang had no time to react before he was put in a chokehold. Xiao Se only needed to use a little force, and he would die here. This lightning fire round, Yunchang had no time to resist, never mind Lien beside him. Just as Yunchang accepted that this was his death date, he heard someone laugh quietly beside him. Xiao Se, you have some renown, how can you still pick soft persimmons to squeeze? Hearing this sentence, Yunchang felt the pressure let up around his neck, followed by the horror of having narrowly escaped death. Bian Yanmei extended a palm, Xiao Se was forced to drop Yunchang to meet him head-on, his fan blocking the palm aura, he filled it with inner chi and returned the attack. On both sides, their robes billowed, in an instant more than 10 moves had been exchanged. I thought Yan Wushi's eldest disciple was outstanding, but it's just this. Xiao Se laughed coldly. As I see it, your Wuzhong is not that much stronger than you Shenjians. In front of Sankingdian, people fought in close quarters, killing intent was pervasive, everything descended into chaos. Shen Qiao however hadn't moved. Because in the crowd there was another who also hadn't moved. Sang Jingxing. Last time at Shijiandawai, first there was Yuan Xiaoxia running interference, then Hulagu's appearance. Shen Qiao ultimately didn't get a chance to fight Sang Jingxing. But Sang Jingxing could see the transformation that Shen Qiao had undergone. Compared to previous, the other was no longer the blind man subject to anyone's whims. Although his gaze and handsomeness was even more striking than before, he'd regrettably become a flower with thorns, no longer easily digestible. That day the regret of not being able to get what was at hand still plagued Sang Jingxing. Additionally, he was seriously injured by the other, old hate new vengeance combined. He would not let Shen Qiao off easily. He also understood, he had forced Shen Qiao into destroying his own Wuzhong. The other could similarly not leave things as they were. Shen Qiao, seeing you, I feel it is regrettable. He suddenly smiled. Shen Qiao watched him without replying, he didn't ask what was regrettable. Sang Jingxing, regrettable that under Banbu Peak the person who found you wasn't me. Otherwise how could he let Yan Wushi win that round? This kind of beauty, this kind of caliber, he was born to be part of Hehuan sect, he ought to have been a training tool spending his time behind the bed curtains. Shen Qiao was not surprised and not angry, but asked an unrelated question, where is Yuan Zongju? After our farewell, this poor one has missed her. Sang Jingxing, a small smile, I forgot to tell you, today Hehuan sect Zongju is a different person. If you are willing to visit Hehuan sect, I might be willing to show you where her bones are buried in the water. Shen Qiao raised an eyebrow, you killed her. Sang Jingxing, you're surprised. Shen Qiao shook his head, I've long heard you two were fighting, just that Yuan Zongju doesn't seem like the type of person to sit around waiting for her death. Sang Jingxing, she definitely had her smarts, otherwise I wouldn't have waited until now to kill her. Shen Qiao, it is regrettable. Sang Jingxing, you liked her. Shen Qiao, although Yuan Zongju was a woman, compared to you, she had the aura befitting the head of a sect. If you are the Zongju, I'm afraid after today Hehuan sect will have to change their status again. Sang Jingxing, vexed to the extreme, laughing, what does that mean? Shen Qiao, the meaning is, I'm going to kill you. Saying this, he moved. A small movement of his wrists, his form became shadow, within the abrupt 10,000 zhang all-encompassing sword light, his form vanished. Body moves to will, sword moves to soul, mountains and rivers despair, heavens and earth turn pale. End of the chapter. Stay tuned for more BL.